Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Simple Spoken English. In today's story, we'll journey through the life of a young boy named Tom, who faced many hardships growing up in a small village. After losing his parents, Tom had to take on the responsibility of caring for his younger siblings. Despite all the challenges, Tom's determination, kindness, and hard work helped him overcome every obstacle in his path. This heartwarming story is not just about perseverance, but also about the importance of family, love, and education. Stick around as we follow Tom's inspiring journey of struggle, growth, and success. Let's dive in. Once upon a time, in a quiet village nestled between rolling hills and lush green fields, there was a young boy named Tom. The village was a peaceful place, where the sun bathed the land in a golden glow every morning, and the chirping of birds filled the air. The village was far from the hustle and bustle of the city, with simple, hard-working people who lived in harmony with nature. Tom lived with his family in a small, modest house made of wood and stone. It wasn't much, but it was home, and it was filled with love. Tom's father had passed away when Tom was very young, leaving his mother, a kind and determined woman, to care for him, his younger brother, Ben, and his little sister, Lily. Despite the challenges, their mother made sure the children never went hungry. She worked tirelessly, sewing clothes for the villagers, growing vegetables in their little garden, and making sure her children were always cared for. Tom was the eldest, and he understood the heavy burden his mother carried. He saw the lines of worry on her face, the tiredness in her eyes after long days of work. Though he was only 13, he tried his best to help her. Every morning, he would rise before the sun, often waking up to the sound of the cockerels crowing in the distance. Together, he and his mother would tend to the garden. They would water the plants with a tin can they shared, pulling out weeds with their bare hands. Tom knew that their garden was more than just a source of food. It was a symbol of their survival, a testament to their strength as a family. But one year, something changed. The weather had been harsher than usual, and the crops didn't grow as well as they had in the past. The vegetables were small and withered, and the money his mother earned from sewing was not enough to buy extra food. Tom began to notice how thin she was becoming. She often skipped meals, telling the children she wasn't hungry. But Tom knew the truth. One cold autumn evening, as the wind howled through the cracks in their little house, Tom's mother fell gravely ill. She developed a cough that grew worse by the day, and her body became frail. Tom was frightened. He had always seen his mother as a pillar of strength, but now, lying in bed, she seemed so fragile, so human. Tom did everything he could to take care of her. He cooked meals for his siblings, took care of the house, and even tried to sew, although his hands were clumsy with the needle. He tried to hide his fear, but the sadness weighed heavily on him. Every time he heard her cough, his heart clenched with worry. What would they do if something happened to her? How would they survive? One evening, as the stars glittered in the sky like diamonds, his mother called him to her bedside. Her voice was faint, almost a whisper, but it was filled with love. Tom knelt by her side, holding her cold, thin hand in his. He had so many questions but didn't know how to ask them. "Tom," she whispered, her eyes full of warmth. "You have always been so strong, my boy. I need you to promise me something." Tom's heart raced. "What is it, Mom?" he asked, his voice trembling. He wasn't sure if he was ready to hear what she would say. Promise me that you will take care of Ben and Lily." Her words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. No matter what happens, no matter how hard life becomes, you must stay strong. They will need you, Tom. You must be brave for all of us. Tears welled up in Tom's eyes, but he nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He wanted to be brave, to show her that he was capable of taking on the responsibility she was entrusting to him. But inside, he felt like a child again, scared and uncertain. Still, he squeezed her hand and whispered, "I promise, Mom." A few days later, she was gone. The grief hit Tom like a tidal wave. He wanted to cry, to shout, to run away from the pain, but he couldn't. He had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. He buried his sadness deep inside, knowing that his brother and sister needed him now more than ever. At just 13 years old, Tom became the head of the household. It was a heavy burden for someone so young, but Tom was determined not to let his family down. He found odd jobs around the village, helping farmers harvest crops, cleaning houses, carrying water for the villagers, anything to earn a little money to feed his siblings. Every day was a struggle, but Tom never complained. He worked from sunrise to sunset, his hands rough and blistered from the labor, but he never gave up. He couldn't afford to. His little brother, Ben, was just 7, full of energy and curiosity. He looked up to Tom as a hero, never fully understanding the sacrifices his older brother was making for him. Lily, who was only 5, was too young to understand the weight that Tom carried, but she adored him. She would cling to him at night, seeking comfort and safety in his arms. Tom knew that education was the key to a better future. Although he had to work to support his family, he never stopped dreaming of a better life for them. Late at night, when Ben and Lily were fast asleep, Tom would sit by the dim light of a small oil lamp and study. He had always loved learning, and now, more than ever, he saw it as a way out of the poverty that had trapped his family for so long. He borrowed books from the village school teacher and taught himself to read and write in English. It wasn't easy, but Tom was determined. He practiced speaking English every chance he got, knowing that one day it might open doors to opportunities he could never have imagined. The years passed, and Tom grew stronger, both physically and mentally. He was no longer a boy, but a young man, hardened by the challenges he had faced. He continued to work hard, but he never stopped learning. Every evening, after a long day of labor, he would study. He became fluent in English, learning not just from books, but by listening to the radio, mimicking the voices of the broadcasters, and practicing his pronunciation. By the time Tom turned 18, his hard work was starting to pay off. He had saved up enough money to send Ben to a proper school in the nearby town. It wasn't easy for him to let Ben go, but he knew it was the right thing to do. Ben was a bright boy, full of potential, and Tom wanted him to have the opportunities that he had missed. Lily, now 15, was also showing a keen interest in learning. She dreamed of becoming a teacher, and Tom encouraged her every step of the way. He helped her with her homework, teaching her everything he had learned. She admired her brother deeply, not just for his intelligence, but for his unwavering dedication to their family. One day, a businessman from the city came to the village. He was looking for young, hard-working men to come and work in his factory. When he heard about Tom, the boy who had taken on the responsibility of raising his siblings after their mother's death, he was impressed. He offered Tom a job in the city, with a promise of a better life. For Tom, this was a chance he had only dreamed of. The idea of leaving the village and moving to the bustling city was both exciting and terrifying. But he knew that this job could change everything for his family. After discussing it with Ben and Lily, who by now were old enough to understand, Tom decided to accept the offer. The city was unlike anything Tom had ever seen. The streets were crowded with people rushing to and fro, the buildings towering high above him. It was overwhelming at first, but Tom was determined to make the best of it. He started working in the factory, doing whatever tasks were assigned to him. The work was tough, and the hours were long, but Tom didn't mind. He was focused on one thing: building a better future for his family. As he settled into his new life in the city, Tom met a young woman named Emma. She was kind, intelligent, and had a gentle spirit that drew people to her. They became fast friends, sharing their stories and dreams. Emma was studying to become a nurse, and like Tom, she had worked hard to get to where she was. She admired Tom's dedication to his family, and he found comfort in her companionship. Over time, their friendship blossomed into something deeper. Tom had never allowed himself to think much about love. His life had been too consumed with work and responsibility. But with Emma, things were different. She brought light into his life, reminding him that it was okay to dream not just for others, but for himself as well. As Tom's relationship with Emma grew, so did his determination to keep improving himself. He continued studying in the evenings, attending night classes to further his education. He knew that learning was the key to unlocking new opportunities, and he wasn't going to let anything stand in his way. After a year of working in the factory, Tom had saved enough money to bring Ben and Lily to live with him in the city. He found a small apartment for the three of them, and though it wasn't luxurious, it was a significant improvement from their old village home. They were together again, and that was what mattered most to Tom. Ben, who had excelled at school, was now a young man with a passion for engineering. Thanks to Tom's efforts, he had received a scholarship to a technical school, where he was thriving. Tom couldn't have been prouder of his little brother, who had come so far from the curious child he once was. Ben often thanked Tom for giving him the chance to pursue his dreams, but Tom always humbly reminded him that it was Ben's hard work and dedication that had made it all possible. Lily, too, was blossoming into a confident and intelligent young woman. She had passed her exams with flying colors and had been accepted into a teacher's college where she was training to become an educator, just as she had always dreamed. Tom's heart swelled with pride whenever he thought of the bright futures that lay ahead for his siblings, and he knew that all the sacrifices he had made were worth it. But Tom wasn't done yet. He had his own dreams to pursue, dreams that had been put on hold for so long. With Emma's encouragement, he decided to enroll in a university to further his education. He wanted to study business and management, hoping that one day he could start his own company and provide not only for his family, but also for others in need. Emma and Tom's relationship continued to grow, and it wasn't long before they became inseparable. Emma, now a qualified nurse, was supportive of Tom's ambitions, and together they dreamed of a future where they could build a life for themselves, one filled with love, joy, and success. Years passed, and Tom's perseverance paid off once again. After graduating from university, he landed a well-paying job at a reputable company, and his dream of starting his own business became a reality. He opened a small clothing manufacturing company, using the skills he had learned from his mother's sewing and tailoring, combined with his education and business acumen. His company grew rapidly, and soon he was employing many people from his old village, offering them the same opportunities that had once been given to him. Tom's life had come full circle. From a boy who had faced seemingly insurmountable challenges, he had become a man of great strength and determination. He had kept the promise he made to his mother all those years ago, to care for Ben and Lily, and to stay strong no matter what. And in doing so, he had not only changed his own life, but also the lives of his family and many others. As he stood in his office one evening, looking out at the city that had once seemed so daunting, Tom couldn't help but feel a sense of deep gratitude. He had learned that life would always present challenges, but with determination, love, and a willingness to learn, those challenges could be overcome. He smiled as he thought of his mother, knowing that she would be proud of the man he had become. Now that we've finished Tom's incredible journey, let's move on to another inspiring story. This time we're going to follow the life of Jack, a young boy with big dreams and even bigger challenges. Jack's story is full of lessons about courage, determination, and never giving up, no matter how tough things get. So, without further ado, let's dive into the world of Jack and discover how he turns his dreams into reality. Once upon a time, in a peaceful little town surrounded by rolling hills and lush green meadows, there lived a young boy named Jack. Jack was a cheerful and curious boy, full of life and imagination. But there was one thing that always made him feel a bit down. He found English hard to learn. He would often sit with a book in his hands, staring at the words that seemed like a puzzle he couldn't solve. Jack loved stories, especially adventure tales, but reading them in English seemed like a difficult task. The more he tried, the more frustrated. Jack's mother, who often talked with the other mothers in town, heard about Mr. Anderson and his love for teaching. One evening, she mentioned Jack's struggles with English to their new neighbor. Mr. Anderson smiled and said, "Why don't you bring Jack over to my house one afternoon? I'd love to help him with his English." The next day, Jack's mother told him about Mr. Anderson's offer. At first, Jack was nervous. He didn't like the idea of making mistakes in front of someone new. But his mother reassured him, saying that Mr. Anderson was kind and patient. So after school, Jack gathered his books and walked down the street to Mr. Anderson's house. As he approached, he noticed how cozy and welcoming the house looked, with flowers blooming in the garden and a big oak tree standing tall in the yard. When Jack arrived, Mr. Anderson greeted him with a warm smile. "Come in, Jack," he said. Inside, the house was just as inviting as the outside. They sat by a large window, that looked out onto the garden, and Mr. Anderson took out a book from his shelf. "Let's read together," he said gently. Jack felt a little shy at first, but Mr. Anderson's friendly manner quickly made him feel at ease. Mr. Anderson began reading the story aloud, slowly and clearly. He paused at the difficult words and explained their meanings. Jack listened carefully, hanging on to every word. At first, it was hard for Jack to understand everything, and he made a lot of mistakes. But Mr. Anderson always smiled and said, "Mistakes are part of learning, Jack. Don't worry about them. The more you practice, the better you'll become." As the days passed, Jack started to look forward to his afternoons with Mr. Anderson. Each day after school, he would visit his new friend's house, and they would read together. Mr. Anderson's patience and kindness never wavered. He answered all of Jack's questions and encouraged him to keep trying, no matter how many mistakes he made. One afternoon, after several weeks of reading together, Mr. Anderson surprised Jack with a special gift. It was a book, a simple storybook filled with beautiful illustrations and easy-to-understand English words. Jack's eyes lit up with joy as he held the book in his hands. "Thank you so much," he exclaimed, hugging the book tightly. Mr. Anderson smiled and said, "I think you're ready to start reading on your own, Jack." That night, Jack couldn't wait to dive into the book. He sat in his bed with the book open in front of him, slowly reading each word aloud. The pictures helped him understand the story, and as he turned each page, he felt a sense of pride and excitement. For the first time, he could follow the story without getting too lost in the words. It wasn't easy, but it was fun, and Jack knew he was getting better. As Jack continued to read every night, his English skills improved steadily. He became more confident in his reading, and soon he was reading aloud to his little sister, who listened with wide eyes and a big smile. Jack loved sharing the stories with her, and seeing how much she enjoyed them made him feel proud of his progress. One afternoon, Jack's mother decided to pay a visit to Mr. Anderson's house. She knocked on the door, and when Mr. Anderson opened it, she had tears of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you so much for helping Jack," she said. "His confidence has grown so much, and he's doing better at school." Mr. Anderson was touched by her words. He smiled and replied, "Jack is a bright boy. I'm just helping him discover what he's capable of. He has a bright future ahead of him." Hearing his mother and Mr. Anderson talk about him made Jack feel proud, but he also felt inspired to do something special for Mr. Anderson. Jack decided to write a letter to Mr. Anderson in English. It was his way of showing gratitude and proving how much he had learned. He spent hours choosing his words carefully and working hard on the letter. When he finally finished, he felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. The next day, Jack handed the letter to Mr. Anderson. As Mr. Anderson read the letter, tears welled up in his eyes. He hugged Jack and said, "I'm so proud of you, Jack. You've worked hard, and it shows. This letter means a lot to me." That moment was one that both Jack and Mr. Anderson would cherish forever. As the years went by, Jack grew older and eventually went off to college. He decided to study English literature, a subject he had once found difficult, but had grown to love thanks to Mr. Anderson's guidance. Jack never forgot the afternoons spent reading by the window, the lessons learned, and the encouragement that had changed his life. Years later, Jack received the sad news that Mr. Anderson had passed away. Jack felt a deep sorrow in his heart, but he also knew that he had to honor Mr. Anderson's memory. He decided to become a teacher, just like Mr. Anderson, so that he could help other children the way he had been helped. Jack wanted to pass on the kindness and patience that had made such a difference in his own life. In his classroom, Jack always remembered Mr. Anderson's gentle encouragement. He never got frustrated when his students made mistakes. Instead, he praised their efforts and motivated them to keep trying, no matter how difficult things seemed. Jack often shared stories of Mr. Anderson with his students, telling them how a kind neighbor had helped him fall in love with reading and learning. His students listened with admiration and were inspired by the story. One day, a little girl in Jack's class came to him in tears. She told him that she found English hard and that she felt she wasn't good enough to learn it. Jack knelt down beside her, just as Mr. Anderson had done for him all those years ago. He told her that making mistakes was a natural part of learning and that everyone learns at their own pace. The girl smiled through her tears, comforted by Jack's kind words. As time went on, Jack became known throughout the town as a kind and patient teacher, just like Mr. Anderson had been. Children loved coming to his class, and parents were grateful for the way Jack helped their children grow and learn. Jack knew that he was making a difference in their lives, and that knowledge filled him with a deep sense of fulfillment. Many years later, Jack retired from teaching, but his legacy of kindness and patience lived on. His former students, inspired by his example, went on to achieve great things. Some became teachers themselves, passing on the lessons Jack had taught them. Jack often visited the town's library, where he donated books in Mr. Anderson's name. He loved seeing children. Many years later, Jack retired from teaching, but his legacy of kindness and patience lived on. His former students, inspired by his example, went on to achieve great things. Some became teachers themselves, passing on the lessons Jack had taught them. Jack often visited the town's library, where he donated books in Mr. Anderson's name. He loved seeing children explore the joys of reading, just as he had once done with the help of a kind neighbor. The town decided to honor both Jack and Mr. Anderson by placing a statue in the town square. It stood as a symbol of the power of kindness, patience, and the impact that one person can have on another's life. Visitors from all around would come to hear the story of two teachers, one who inspired the other to spread love and learning. Jack's life and the life of Mr. Anderson became an inspiration to many. Their legacy of kindness and encouragement lived on in the hearts of all who knew them, proving that, with a little patience and love, anyone can overcome their challenges and achieve their dreams.